Do you support quotas or not? Yes or no?
Well, I support anything that brings more women into our party.
That is quotas, isn't it, based on historical evidence?
If a state
strong historical evidence.
If a state division comes up with quotas to achieve the outcome, then I'm all for it.
Are you agnostic?
Yes, if they come up with another method to achieve the outcome, I'm supportive too.
From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is Inside Politics. I'm Jacqueline Maley. Today we have a very special guest for our podcast. She's a former shearer, she's a pilot and a mother of three. She has a dark past as a punk in Canberra. She has been one of the only women in the room in successive Liberal cabinets. She was a deputy to former opposition leader Peter Dutton, and following the last election she of course took his job. She is of course opposition leader Sussan Ley. Welcome to the podcast, Ms Ley. Thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to join you, Jacqueline. And you, James.
And we also have our chief political commentator, James Massola. We're going to talk about the coalition's so-called women problem. We're going to talk about how you plan on stopping a split within the coalition over energy policy. And most importantly, we just want to get to know you as a person and find out who you are for the benefit of our listeners. So listen, I just want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself because a lot of our listeners won't know a lot about you. Do you want to just give us a brief personal bio?
My story is a very Australian story. A migrant to Australia in my mid-teens with a passion for flying aeroplanes. Landed in Canberra eventually and went to school at two great Canberra public schools and was determined that I would fly aeroplanes, worked 3 jobs to do that, struggled along the way, failed along the way, had a bit of heartbreak, ended up working in air traffic control and then as an aerial mustering pilot in Western Queensland. That was amazing. It gave me respect for the dignity of a hard day's manual labour, something that I've never lost. While in the shearing sheds, I met my then husband and came home onto the family farm in northeast Victoria, and I describe myself as a farmer's wife. Life on the land was tough, as it is for so many who live on the land today. I've walked many miles in their shoes. And so while raising my 3 children, I went to university age 30 and gained qualifications in economics, tax law and accounting, and worked for the Australian Tax Office. And that pathway led me to a fascination with politics, but more importantly, the economic policy debate. I saw the way it linked with the lives of my family and the small rural community in which I lived. And at the same time, I was part of the implementation of the new tax system in 2000, 2001. And all of that just gave me energy and enthusiasm I joined the Liberal Party some years before, put my hand up to come into Parliament. So when I say my story is an Australian story, I love it when I tell my story and then I meet people around the country who give me their versions, who remember, as I do, what it was like to walk into a university campus and feel totally out of place as a mum looking, a bit like the battered farm ute that I'd just stepped out of and holding a crying baby, and having another woman who was in charge there come out and say, welcome, and, we want to help you in your journey in education. So there's been many points along the way where women have helped me, where communities have supported me, and where I have felt the great Australian dream in this incredible country as something I want to share, but most importantly want to fight for every single Australian. So I hope you can tell, Jacqueline, it's not a short introduction, so I'll end there, that the way I see my story and my journey in Australia is through the prism of our Liberal values and aspiration, backing someone who wants to have a crack and get ahead and work hard.
I want to ask you about Liberal values in a minute, but
just to pick up something you said then, Sussan, about, if I may, ending up in Canberra. You've skipped over a little bit there in that, and I find this fascinating. You were born in Nigeria to English parents. As a toddler, you moved to the UAE, to the United Arab Emirates. You went to boarding school in England, and then you ended up in Canberra. Tell us about that. Is there a legacy, I guess, from that moving around for you? Did it teach you something? Did it leave a lasting effect?
I loved the Emirates as a child. I loved the wide open spaces of the desert. I connected with them the way I think I've connected with Outback Australia. But I'll be honest, it was really tough to be sent to boarding school on the other side of the world, age 10. And we didn't have FaceTime and we didn't have phones. And so I didn't speak to my parents for months on end. And my mother would write to me on a little blue aerogram. Some people will know what they are. And after breakfast, we'd all walk into the room and look to see if we had a letter. And I often didn't have a letter. And I didn't know what was happening in the rest of my family. And I remember it was tough. And it developed in me that sense of self-reliance, that you've got to depend on you because there's no one else. And in all of that, there was this sort of magic of my father having said to me since I was small, one day we're going to move to Australia and we're going to have this incredibly different life and the family's going to be together. So I hung on to that and I actually studied the Murray and Murrumbidgee rivers in geography as a child in an English boarding school and drew Griffith, Leeton and Narrandera on the map. And now I represent those communities as their local MP.
You were manifesting your future.
But the magic of Australia was something that when I landed in Brisbane, we lived there briefly on a small farm for a while, I just saw this incredible country, this bright blue sky, and I've obviously loved it every single day since. But it is such a privilege to share that migrant story, but to listen to everyone's migrant story as well.
Yeah, okay. So you come to Canberra as a teenager and as we've famously you became a punk in the sort of Canberra scene, in the 80s?
Late 70s, early 80s, yeah.
70s, early 80s. Being a punk with its anarchical sort of philosophy is not something that we generally associate with people on the conservative side of politics. Were you drawn to the punk aesthetic or the music or the philosophy?
The way I saw punk then as someone who I didn't fit in at school. My British accent singled me out. I didn't make friends easily. And look, it wasn't great. It's funny, I walk into any classroom today and I can see the kids who are like me and I can identify with them and I know what it's like. But I found myself in Dickson College. Yeah. And Dickson College was the sort of educational institution where you could be who you wanted to be. You didn't have to wear clothes. You didn't have to wear uniforms.
You
could wear what you liked.
It was liberal, but not
I remember
liberal.
walking to school up the bike path from the Dickson shops with bare feet and, crazy outfits and piercings and the rest of it, purple hair. No one blinked an eyelid. And this was part of expressing myself. But the punk ethos is a fearless, honest belief in yourself, and that's what I drew on. Okay. And that's what gave me the confidence to go forward and do the things that I knew I wanted to do, like flying aeroplanes, which everyone had said, Okay. And the other thing punk gives you, it's okay not to fit in. Yeah. It's okay not to belong.
But then you go on and you join the Liberal Party, which is obviously conforming to an institution. You talk about liberal values. Do you think Australians know what liberal values are, particularly after the last election?
I think we need to remind them that liberal values are, in the main, their values. But no, I don't think they heard from us as to what our agenda was. And I've said many times, we've got to meet modern Australia where they are. We've got to better reflect, respect and then represent modern Australia.
So how do you sum up those values? You talked about aspiration just now, but what else is there apart from that?
Opportunity, reward for effort, hard work, that if you commit and you have a crack, we're there to support you getting ahead. And that we're all about a government that is better, not bigger. But I don't want to see an equality of outcome in anyone's life story, but I do want to see an equality of opportunity. And I want an economy that is strong enough to work well for the people who get left behind.
Do you think, Sussan, the people, when they look at the modern Liberal Party today, when they judged, when they cast their vote, I should say, at the last election, the one before that, I don't think they saw that party. I think they saw a party that's drifted to the right too much. And that has left a lot of Australians behind or just moved away from them, the exact opposite of what you're talking about. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you have a different theory? How do you fix it, more importantly?
By explaining that aspiration is the thread that connects every single part of Australian society. So whether you characterise it the way you just have, James, it's not the way I would look at it. I would say that those, centre, left, right descriptions aren't particularly helpful. We've got a broad membership, broad party room, and they reflect lots of different views in the Australian public today. But the thing that connects them all is that aspiration. And we're there for individuals who want to get ahead, who want to have a crack, who aspire in their lives. And we're there to make sure that we have the right safety net for those who fall behind. I want to balance it up with that because, I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had in my life, but I know that I meet people every day who've got more courage than me or any of my colleagues have ever had, just to get out of bed in the morning and manage their lives and deal with the issues that they're facing. So we've always got to be there for them. And to do that, you do have to have a strong economy, and you do have to have it working well for every single Australian.
I mean, you say that the modern Liberal Party needs to represent all Australians, and it's, you know, that you have a diversity there, but it very famously hasn't really represented women to the extent that it could have, which is why the Liberals' female vote has been declining so precipitously over the last few decades. Just first of all, before we get into that, would you call yourself a feminist?
Well, yes, I would. And it's interesting because the word feminist isn't used much. It was used a lot when I was trying to get into
the time.
I'm very happy. And, you know, and I'll tell you what I mean by feminist, because I used it in the era when, you know, the people who owned corporate jets didn't want me flying them, who said to me quietly, we don't have a job for you because it's not us, Susan, it's just that the travelling public doesn't really want to see a woman up the front and, you know, come back next year. You know, that was something that, you know, burned in me, how I was completely singled out, never mind my qualifications, my licence, all of the things I'd done. It was simply because of my gender. So we didn't do well with women. I just want to confront that. I want to acknowledge that. I want to say that since in 2001, when I came into Parliament, more women in Australia voted for us than they did anyone else. And that number's been declining ever since, which is why I am so determined and so insistent that we fix this women's problem. You talked, you gave an address to the National Press Club this week, which was really strong, and we both were really interested in it. You talked in that address about coercive control and domestic violence, and you said that you knew what coercive control felt like. Do you want to elaborate on that at all? Have you had personal experience with it? Look, I have had personal experiences, and I don't choose to share them publicly. But I want the women of Australia to know that I know and that I'm with them and that I understand how it feels and what it's like, and how sometimes only looking back can you really understand what went on. And when you look at the statistics that I quoted yesterday in terms of the number of women in this country who have been affected by sexual harassment, coercive control, violence, workplace harassment, the Liberal Party I lead will work constructively on our country's greatest national shame, family and domestic violence. 1 in 2 women has experienced sexual harassment in their lifetime. From the age of 15, 1 in 3 women has experienced violence, and 1 in 6 have experienced physical or sexual abuse. You know, even though on some indicators we're improving, you know, I wonder, when you look at those statistics, are we improving? Are we doing the best we can do? So the very strong message I wanted to deliver yesterday about this was that this is above politics. This is something that I want to work with the Prime Minister on, and we just have to do better. We can't have years like last year. You know, I remember reading out the names of women who'd lost their lives to intimate partner violence, and in the time it took us to construct the media communication, that number had increased, and that really brought it home to me. It's not good enough.
It's devastating. After 2022, the election result was bad. It was bad, particularly in your female vote, and you were tasked with. You actually said, "We hear you, women of Australia," and you were tasked with doing a sort of listening tour. This is back in 2022. What policies did you come up with, and were they just not implemented? Were you shouted down in cabinet? What happened?
Well, we had a lot of discussion about policies, and I think it's clear that they didn't land in the right way where they needed to, and there's lots of evidence for that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what do you mean when that's a kind of a vague construction? Do you mean that they weren't taken up by your male colleagues or your colleagues within shadow cabinet?
No, I don't mean that. I mean, we supported the government continuing our record women's safety spending. So remember, when we left government, there was a spending trajectory in place. It included record spending for women's safety. We supported a plus $500 million policy for women's health. We came up with individual women's health initiatives around support for ovarian cancer, about further support for endometriosis. So I was part of quite a lot of the policies that people saw. Now, in the end, I think this is an important point, Jacqueline. People saw and heard policies, whether it be in women's health or housing or other areas, they weren't even sure which party was proposing them. That comes back to one of the things we have to do. We have to communicate well to Australians about the things we support, the things we come up for.
Do you really think that's all it was, that the Australian voter wasn't able to distinguish between Liberal policy and Labor policy? Or
not
is
at
it
all.
Something more along the lines of the cultural environment of the Liberals, or what women think that represents?
Well, it's the perception that it's a really blokey party.
Yeah.
Yes, and I understand why that perception is there, because that's what you see, and the picture tells the story. Look, it was many of those different things, and the feedback I got, the anecdotes that I've heard have fed into my thinking, and obviously our review by Prue Goward and Nick Minchin will, articulate more. Look, what actually happened, and give some further meat on the bone, so to speak.
That's the review of the election campaign. But
it will include our policies.
Yeah.
It will include our connection with women, with young people, with migrant Australians, multicultural communities. It will include all of that. And I just want to say again, it'll be frank and fearless, honest, and made public.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, something I wanted to pick up on. It was a recurring theme with Peter Dutton that, you may disagree, but I think he paid lip service to the need to win back those TEAL seats that were lost in 2022. I don't think he sort of did anything in particular. You were tasked with, in fact, trying to win some of these seats back, because that's, through that road is government, right? Why do you think the Liberals lost those seats in 22? Why do you think they failed to pick them up, well, other than Tim Wilson, in 2025?
Big shout out to Tim Wilson for winning back the seat of Goldstein, and he will have a lot of really important data to present to us as a party room. We're meeting in the next couple of days, as you may know, about where we went wrong, and the beginnings of that review process are already underway. Yeah. So again, without getting ahead of the review, I can give you my thoughts at this point in time, and they are that we didn't meet women where they expected us to be. We certainly didn't meet younger Australians, and in some instances, they didn't consider us at all. Yeah. So when you talk about a view they may have had of the Liberal Party, some of the feedback was they didn't think about the Liberal Party. So, there are obviously serious issues to address there as far as how we communicate our message, which is very important, because no matter how well we might do in building a policy platform, politics is about communicating and connecting with the voter. Well, I spoke to a lot of women in the TEAL seats, can I say, particularly those busy mornings when everyone's lined up to go in to vote and they're taking a how to vote card or they're not. And I was quite upfront, and many people knew who I was, and I said, can I ask you, why you're refusing to take our how to vote card, or what are you thinking? And in many cases, they said, we don't know that the modern Liberal Party understands our busy lives as mums with children, worrying about childcare, worrying about our mortgages, worrying about the cost of living, worrying about our elderly parents. This is a life I've lived personally. I remember those years. You're piling the children in the car, you're rushing off, you're trying to finish your university assignments. You've got your employer, even if it's a generous employer, but you need to get there. You've run out of leave, and then you've got the home front, and you don't feel you're doing anything properly, and you've just got this sort of feelings of that working mum guilt, if I can call it that. And then there are women who talk to me, and this is at polling booths too, about the challenge of having children and stepping away from a career. How do you time it? How do you not miss out on all of the work that you've done to put into your career?
And how do you ensure your own financial security in the future?
How do you?
On that question, do you support quotas or not? Yes or no?
Well, I support anything that brings more women into our party.
That is quotas, isn't it, based on historical evidence?
If a state division,
historical evidence.
If a state division comes up with quotas to achieve the outcome, then I'm all for it.
Are you agnostic?
Yes, if they come up with another method to achieve the outcome, I'm supportive too. Because remember, the Federated Liberal Party.
I know what you're trying to say, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but people do get very frustrated with this, because quotas work. We know that. It's the only thing that works historically, if we're looking at the evidence, right? What other methods could there be, and why doesn't the Liberal Party just pull the trigger and do it? You're the head of the Liberal Party now. You could surely
One of the things that I value in the Liberal Party is the autonomy of our state divisions. That's the party we are. That's where we've come from. It's not a top-down hierarchical approach. The only view I have is that we must get more women in our parliamentary party. I'm not going to tell divisions or individuals how to get there. I've got women who are, standing up right now. You're going to use the weight of your influence, though? Absolutely. Absolutely I am. I think I've started that already.
For quotas?
Well, I'm arguing for the results because you're talking about a process. I'm talking about an outcome, and that outcome has to be more women. So, it's not, by the way, everyone talks about the women in the parliament. That's vital. To get those women in the parliament, we have to have those women putting their hand up, joining the party, standing up.
Which takes a long time.
So, it can take time, but one of the things I do, by the way, is meet women one-on-one and say, have you thought that what you're doing is pretty amazing and I reckon you align with our values. We'd love you to join us. So we're starting to have those conversations.
Okay. So in your view, being the first Liberal Party leader to say quotas, I'm open to them, is that enough? And then as an addendum to that, Margaret Guilfoyle Network was set up after the last election to solve the women problem, in inverted commas. It's never been heard of again. Then you've got Charlotte Mortlock and Hilmer's network, which is actually out there doing things. Will you engage with them? What specific things will you do to get more women in? Like one specific thing.
Talking about it is not enough. You're absolutely right. Yeah. Engaging with people who are working hard to make it happen is high on my priority list. Talking one-on-one with women is high on my priority list too. Can I just come back to the remark I made before? Yes. Somebody years ago said to me, why don't you join your local Liberal Party? And I did. Others have said to me, why don't you put your hand up for this in terms of our party? And I have. And I love seeing women do well. I love being part of mentoring, officially or unofficially, for younger women. And I'm not the only one in our party that is well equipped to do that. Yep. So we will all be involved, all of my team, in making sure this happens. Okay. And I'm very happy to be judged by the outcome, by the way.
All right, well, we'll come back to you. We'll get you back on.
So come back to me.
We just need to ask you very quickly about net zero. Obviously, you famously negotiated a brief but rather bitter split with the coalition, with your coalition partner at the beginning of your tenure. Net zero is going to be probably the most divisive issue within the coalition. What is your personal view on net zero? Obviously, you've backed it in the past.
We got smashed at the last election and all of our policies are up for review. So I need to say that because every policy, including energy policy. So you've talked about net zero, it's one part of energy policy. I've set up a working group led by Dan Tehan, who's the Shadow Minister for Energy. I'm not going to get ahead of what this working group will do, but it will include everyone who wants to have a say on what will be an iterative and continuous policy development process. So whatever the government brings forward, that group and our wider party room will be able to consider it. But our energy policy will be underpinned by two fundamental things. Our responsibility in the face of the global challenge of climate change to reduce emissions, and that we must have a stable, reliable energy grid so that households and businesses can have affordable electricity. Now, I mention those two things because they're key to the energy policy going forward, and they're also key to how we will hold the government to account.
These are all eminently sensible things that you're talking about. But meanwhile, has anyone told the Nats that?
Matt Canavan's sort of doing his own review about net zero, isn't he? And we already know what he thinks about net zero.
And when that party room meets, that Nationals party room meets for the first time post-election, I mean, I would not be hugely surprised if the first thing they do is dump net zero.
Well, I'm not inside the Nationals party room, and I've always said they will do policy for the Nationals inside the Nationals party room. We'll do policy for the Liberals inside the Liberals party room. When we come together as a shadow cabinet and then step out with a policy decision that's made, then that unifies us all. So it's important that we do get the process right leading up to that, and I acknowledge there are different views.
We're going to extract a promise from you now that you'll come back after and you'll talk to us about net zero and all of the other things. We hope this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Look forward to it.
Thank you so much for making the time to come on. We've really enjoyed having you.
Yeah, too.
And unfortunately, we have to let you go.
Thank you. Thank you both.